George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
And it's live from Rochdale. Get used to it. It is the mother of all talk shows. And this week it's the Battle of the Giants. Tonight it's Rishi Sunak versus Sir Keir Starmer. An encounter which has all the allure of Slovenia versus England in Euro 2024. But it'll be a 0-0 draw, a bore fest. It will be a nothing burger. Tomorrow might be different, where Laurel and Hardy square up in the American presidential debate. Will Joe Biden's trousers fall down on the stage? And if they do, what terrible consequences will we see? Will Donald Trump make it in his manacles and handcuffs and orange jumpsuit and the sword of Damocles of imprisonment hanging over his head? If you want to see a real battle of the giants, right after this show, you can watch me versus PiersMorgan in a 90-minute, 1.5-hour slugfest, and you can decide who won the bout. We'll be talking about all of these things over the next 1 hour and 58 minutes precisely. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
But first, sing hallelujah. Julian Assange is free and in Australia and in the arms of his loving family. His wife Stella, his children that have, in one case, never seen as a free man, his parents, his wider family, brother, and his friends and neighbours are celebrating in Australia. It was, in the end, a dramatic turn of events. Around about 2 o'clock in the morning, just the other night, I discovered that Julian had left Britain in an unmarked van onto a private jet and bound for somewhere called the Mariana Islands. Where are the Mariana Islands, I asked. What is the Mariana Islands? A speck in the Pacific Ocean, which, would you know, is American territory. Just as American as New Jersey or Peoria, don't you know? And it's China that's the expansionist power in the Pacific, they like to tell you. But there is a little spot that will be forever downtown USA. They had to fly him there at his expense, $500,000, because they would not allow him to fly commercial. They had to fly him there at his expense. He's got to pay the Australian government $500,000. Come on, Albanese, you're taking credit for springing Julian from the Supermax. You can at least pay for the aircraft that the United States insisted on. And he made a few-minute appearance in a courtroom in downtown Mariana Islands and pled guilty to a single charge under the Espionage Act, was given a prison sentence exactly coterminous with the time he'd already spent in Belmarsh Dungeon in London. And thus, as the judge said, this case comes to an end. Except it doesn't. Julian's free now, but if I were him, I'd pay considerable attention to what will be my final private address. I don't trust the United States, this administration or the next one, not to put a bag over his head and rendition him extraordinarily to somewhere, I don't know, maybe back to the Mariana Islands. Maybe they'll build a black prison there. Don't trust the United States. And I'm sorry, Jennifer Robinson, who perhaps had to ritually and effusively thank all the leaders of the Australian government for the splendid role that they have played in this final outcome. I don't trust them either, not as far as I could throw them. So, Julian, give me a call. You know I've been your best pal, and right from the beginning, when others doubted you, I was firm. When others slandered you, I defended you. I've actually been blackballed, blacklisted, shadow banned, no platform for my defense for you. So you know very well that I am someone you can trust. Find a way of communicating with me, and I'll suggest somewhere where you might finally domicile. But grateful for small mercies, Julian is free. And when I saw him kiss his good wife and lift her literally off her feet, I shed a tear, as did many millions of those who've campaigned for Julian Assange around the world for all of these years. 15 years almost now. My then 7-year-old son, who's now a man, drew a childish plan when we visited Julian in the Ecuadorian embassy with the rooftops and chimneys, and worked out a way that we could spring Julian from his then Ecuadorial exile. We could take him over this roof and around that chimney, and we could land him right behind Harrods, and we could whisk him away. The dreams of a child. But now they have come true. Julian's free. But at what cost? You see, Julian had to plead guilty to having breached the Espionage Act, which he never breached. He was an Australian citizen, working in Britain, in Iceland, in Sweden, in other European countries, never set foot in the United States. He's a journalist, a publisher. It is a right under the First Amendment of the US Constitution for a journalist to publish information which comes his way, as long as there is a public interest defense. And boy, was there a public interest defense. Julian revealed war crimes on a grand scale, on a scale as epic as the Roman Empire itself. Crimes committed by the American Empire, by the British Empire, in the parts of the world that would otherwise have remained dark, unilluminated. We would never have known about the US order to light them up. Them being a large group of civilian people, including children, and crucially including 2 Reuters journalists who were lit up all right by an American helicopter gunship. The video from the cockpit of that act of mass murder ordered by an American commander, light them up, he said twice. We would never have known about it. And we would never have known about many of the war crimes that took place in Bagram Air Base, in Abu Ghraib prison, in Guantanamo Bay, in black sites all over the world. We would never have known about them but for Julian Assange. Instead of pinning a gold medal on his chest, awarded for services to freedom of speech, to the freedom to know what your government is doing on your dime and in your name, instead of pinning a gold medal, they pinned a conviction under the Espionage Act upon his chest. And thus, the chilling effect of the crucifixion, for that is what it was, of Julian Assange has in any case been achieved. Julian's life is saved for now. Hallelujah. But what journalist will risk being the next Julian Assange? Taken to the Mariana Islands, convicted under the Espionage Act, and sent not home to Australia, but to Guantanamo Bay, which, wonder of all wonders, remains entirely open for business as usual, despite a president long ago called Barack Obama being elected on the pledge that he was going to close it. The crimes of the Western empires around the world are never ending, and they just reached into the bowels of the British state and effectively convicted a journalist, a gentle man, a beautiful man, as a matter of fact, who was slandered in the most foul way. In the epic battle I talked about in the introduction between me and PiersMorgan, long delayed, a match long delayed, has now happened, and you'll be able to see it right after this show. In it, amongst other things, PiersMorgan appears literally astounded, or as he put it on Twitter, gobsmacked, that I trust Vladimir Putin more than I trust Sir Keir Starmer. Actually, I've made many statements over the years, but that one is the ultimate statement of the bleeding obvious. Vladimir Putin never lied to me. Sir Keir Starmer did lie to me. Vladimir Putin is nothing to do with me. He's the president of somebody else's country. Sir Keir Starmer is apparently about to be the Prime Minister of my country. Vladimir Putin did not conspire to deport Julian Assange to Sweden, the better for his extradition to the Supermax penitentiary in California and 152 years of penal servitude. It wasn't Putin that did that. It was Keir Starmer. Although he's carefully lost all the papers. He's always telling us he's a former director of public prosecutions. Yes, but whenever an awkward case that he's prosecuted or decided not to prosecute comes up, he tells you it never crossed his desk, or the papers have now been destroyed. So we'll never know what it was that Sir Keir Starmer, as our Director of Public Prosecutions, at our expense, travelled repeatedly to the United States to meet the US Attorney General to discuss. We'll never know, even though we paid for it, even though he's about to be, apparently, Britain's Prime Minister. We'll never know what they were actually discussing. So let me tell you what it was. It was a conspiracy with the United States and the pro-US Swedish government of the time to get their hands on Julian Assange on fake rape charges. You know, that old adage, fake rape charges in the liberal media. Nothing works better. Ask Russell Brand. Ask the Tate brothers. Ask Julian Assange. You'll get a Pavlovian reaction. All the so-called feminists who don't give a toss about all the dead women and girls in Gaza, but they'll be outraged at anonymous fake rape charges on which you can extradite a great whistleblower, publisher, journalist, and then you'll never see or hear him again. Novara Media, Io Cesar. You remember her? She does it like a champion. You remember her? She demanded that Julian Assange be extradited to Sweden. In Novara Media, she demanded it because there are women waiting to have their day in court with Julian Assange, except there were not. There was no rape. There was no accuser. There was no evidence. It was all a conspiracy, the better for the US to get their hands on Julian Assange. And scores of Labour members of Parliament, and scores of others, leaders of NGOs, campaigning organizations, that later metamorphosed into big Julian Assange champions, but who blackballed, blacklisted, no platformed, and shadow banned me because I refused to accept the fake rape allegations against Julian Assange, because I rightly called them out as fake rape allegations while they were demanding that he face his non-existent accusers in Sweden at the time. So Julian, give me a call. I'm so happy my cup overfloweth with joy at your release. And I wish you a long and peaceful and happy life. But trust in God, but tie up your camel just the same. Now, so much else to discuss. The Battle of the Giants in Britain is Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak. Nobody will be watching it. I don't have to worry that any of you are going to switch off the mother of all talk shows and switch on to the ultimate bore fest, worse than England versus Slovenia. None of you are going to do that, and virtually nobody in the country is going to do it either. They would have been better putting me and Farage on the stage with them. Then they would have had record-breaking audiences, but they won't risk that. So these two sluggers will pitter-pat it out, and nothing will change. The Labour lead will endure, although it's falling, and will be under 40% by next Thursday, the 4th of July. First prediction, Keir Starmer will gain fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn, the much maligned, the much slandered predecessor, gained in the election of 2017. Mark my words about that. But under our electoral system, you can get 38% of the vote and 70% of the seats. The Tories will get 20%, second prediction. And you can get 20% but only get 71 seats. Do the maths. Or in the case of Farage, you might get millions of votes and no seats. The Workers' Party will definitely get hundreds of thousands of votes and may only get a small handful of seats. But we are winning the argument. Channel 4 News tonight had one of these qualitative research groups, one of these focus groups. They asked them, who among you is going to vote Conservative on the 4th of July? Nobody raised their hand. Who among you is going to vote Labour as a positive vote? None of them raised their hands. Neither cheek of the same backside is loved by anybody other than those paid to love them in the whole of the British Isles. And that's why here in this constituency in Rochdale, I'm able to tell you that Reform are in second place to me, and an uncomfortably close second place to me. It's causing a great deal of anxiety amongst ethnic minority voters in the constituency, that they might wake up and find a Reform MP here in Rochdale, heaven forfend. But Labour are literally melting like snow on a wall. They are fading fast, fading, failing. Because, you see, Farage has quite an appeal in what used to be the red wall, then became the blue wall, and may be about to become a different shade of blue wall. People ask me, how come he's much higher in the opinion polls than you? Well, first of all, he's in the opinion polls. We're not. They never ask anybody, have not asked anybody if they intend to vote for the Workers' Party. That would be telling. But I'm not at all surprised. It's easier to sell cheap, bigoted, right-wing prejudice than it is to sell Tony Benn-style common sense social -ism, which is what I am trying to sell. But the impact of Farage's entry into this general election has been to debase the currency. Now there's a Dutch auction going on as to who can be the most beastly, the most ghastly, the most mean to Britain's ethnic minorities, especially to Britain's Muslims. It's a Dutch auction. They're bidding against each other as to which of the three of them can play the race card most effectively. And if you don't believe me, then you have not yet seen the scenes yesterday when Keir Starmer, who himself depends upon thousands of votes from the Bangladeshi community in Somerstown in his London constituency, and whose candidates throughout the land could maybe have counted on tens of thousands of votes from Britain's Bangladeshis, were thrown to the wolves, were sacrificed on a stage on which the sun was emblazoned. Not the sun that's sinking in the west, the sun that's sinking at Wapping and London Bridge. The failing sun has not yet faded or failed enough that the Labour leader was going to sit in front of their banner on their stage and slander Britain's hardest working community, the Bangladeshi community, which with its own hands, with no help from the government, with no help from the banks, has built a £4.3 billion a year business in the restaurant and catering trade. The hardest working people in Britain, getting home from their work at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I should know. I know them. I've been in their kitchens. I've met them. In every town and city in this entire country, every village, there's a Bengali restaurant that maybe calls itself an Indian restaurant, but is in fact Bangladeshi. There's 1.3 million Bangladeshi Britons. They were all slandered by the Labour Party today. And guess what? They're all concentrated in key parliamentary constituencies, many of them marginal, none of them now going to vote for Keir Starmer's Labour. Leaves me time only for this. PiersMorgan put to me that I seem to have little respect for what he calls democracy. I said, is this the democracy we're going to see played out tomorrow? When a senile dementia blabbering fool is going to be up against a foghorn with little hands, a big orange face, and a jailer just waiting to whisk him off to a penitentiary. Is that your democracy? Keep it. It's a sham, as far as I'm concerned. It's the mother of all talk shows. You've come to the right place. Right up now is the man behind the great Rand Paul. You don't want to miss him. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Who will win Thursday's Biden-Trump debate? Will it be Biden? Will it be Trump? It's a simple question. You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my Twitter, my X. You can vote on the YouTube community poll, and you can vote on the YouTube stream. And lots of you are doing so, and pretty overwhelmingly so far in one direction. If you are watching on the YouTube stream, please share it with everyone that you're in touch with on that platform. Ditto if you are watching on any of the other platforms that allow you to do that. And while you're on the YouTube stream, make sure you have subscribed to my channel. Who will win Thursday's Biden-Trump debate? Biden or Trump? And if you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And in the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. And as always, a big welcome to those who are joining us to listen to the show on KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. Staying in the United States, I have long thought, and I know that many of you have also, that the best president that we never had in the United States was then Senator Ron Paul. And maybe a close second, his son, Senator Rand Paul. So when it became possible for me to interview Daniel McAdams, the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace, how could I possibly refuse? And you will be glad that I didn't. Daniel, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. And a big salute from us to both Ron and Rand Paul, please. Now, I know it's the Institute for Peace, so peace isn't going so well at the moment, Daniel. Where is World War III going to start? In the Persian Gulf, in the Levant, in the Ukraine, in the South China Sea, or all of them?
Well, in some ways, as Lenin said, the worse the better. You know, I mean, the worse they take us, the closer they take us to war, the more people are waking up. The problem is, can enough people wake up before the war actually starts? As to when the next war may break out, I'm not a betting man. If I were, I'd probably go with the Middle East. We saw today or yesterday, in fact, Amos Hochstein, who is Biden's representative to the Middle East, he said to Hezbollah, look, if Israel starts attacking Lebanon and you retaliate, we're going to help Israel. And by the way, there's nothing we can do to stop Israel from attacking you. So you guys are on your own. So that really was a green light to Israel, which had made a decision already, apparently, to start attacking Hezbollah in full force.
Well, if that were to happen, of course, Hezbollah would fight back with full force. Despite what PiersMorgan thinks, in 2006, Hezbollah gave Israel a bloody good hiding. And Israel is weaker now, and Hezbollah is exponentially stronger. So there's only one way that escalates, and that is Israel's allies have to join in with the war. And if that happens, Hezbollah's allies will have to join in. And hey presto, before you know it, you've got the superpowers at war. Talk about sleepwalking to disaster.
And the first, of course, the first target will be the thousands of American troops that are in Iraq still, and they're in Syria still. They're sitting ducks. They're meant to be sitting ducks, but they'll be the first ones to go. As you know better than anyone, George, when Iran did get involved, when it retaliated for the Israeli attack on a diplomatic facility, Iranian diplomatic facility in Syria, it wasn't well reported in the media. But as you know, what happened is that Iran sent a bunch of drones over to overwhelm the Iron Dome system. And when that was overwhelmed and non-functional, they sent some ballistic missiles in that hit their targets. The only reason the damage wasn't greater was because the United States had a warship off the coast that intercepted 80% of the incoming. So if I were an average Israeli right now, I would be pretty annoyed at the possibility of Iran getting involved and literally decimating the country.
I think if you were the average Israeli right now, you'd be headed for the airport, and hundreds or thousands of them have done so. They have done so, making use of the dual passports that a very large number of them have. But those that are forced to remain there won't be remaining in the north. They won't be in the Galilee because Hezbollah will invade the Galilee and liberate it. And of course, we know, though we're not supposed to talk about it, Israel has the ultimate Masada weapon. It has hundreds of nuclear bombs and might use them.
Certainly against Hezbollah's facilities in southern Lebanon, which, as you point out, George, they're a lot more sophisticated than they were in 2006, and they did give them a right bloody nose back in 06. So if that were to be the case, the thing that astonishes me, looking at it from the American perspective, the American political perspective, I wonder what is in it for the United States? What is in it for Joe Biden? Joe Biden has literally put his entire presidential campaign on a cross to be crucified at the feet of Benjamin Netanyahu. His entire constituency has turned against him. The numbers are completely against him. Yet he says, well, there's nothing we can do to stop this. Well, yeah, there is. Simply say no more money and no more weapons. We're not going to let this escalate because I'm not going to get reelected if it does. But they seem incapable of saying that. And I don't know, some people might say that's the power of the Israeli lobby. That's the power of the donor class, which really does rule American politics, not the voter. That's the real threat to our democracy in the U.S. But the question is, why would he do this? Why would he sacrifice everything for an absolute disastrous war on the horizon?
You could also say that about RFK, and I'm going to turn to him in a minute. But on the subject of the Israel lobby, which is, of course, not Jewish. It is overwhelmingly not Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish or even like Jews to be in the Israel lobby. In fact, many of the evangelical fanatics in the Israel lobby definitely don't like Jews. If you've ever been to their golf clubs, you'll know that. The race last night in New York State, where a pretty zany Democratic squad member, Jamal Bowman, for having the temerity to call for a ceasefire early in the war, was targeted by AIPAC, and it became the most expensive primary in American political history. $16 million was spent in a small district to bring about the defeat of Jamal Bowman. What price democracy, Daniel?
You're right. An otherwise unremarkable character Bowman has been. He hasn't distinguished himself, but he made the one big mistake, which is to step on that third rail, and he's been punished for it. Millions and millions of dollars have passed. But, we're starting to see some light being shed on it. Representative Thomas Massie, who thankfully sits on our board, he was on Tucker Carlson's show a couple of weeks ago where he talked about how you have your own babysitter from AIPAC, and he tells you how to vote and he tells you what to do. I spent 12 years on Capitol Hill as an aide to Dr. Paul, and I know the power of the of the lobby, and I know that it's gotten probably stronger at the time. But Thomas Massie, despite $500,000 being put against him in his constituency, he beat with a 75%, I think, yes vote in his district in a primary. So they can be beat. But the thing about Thomas Massie is he says, look, I don't hate Israel. I vote against all foreign aid. I have principles that I act on. I don't want us to be the policemen of the world. We're pretty bad at it, and a lot of people die when we do it. So it makes it fairly simple when you have kind of an operating philosophy.
Yes, turning to that, Donald Trump is probably the less dangerous option in the presidential campaign. I say probably because you could adduce arguments about his attitude to China, his attitude to Iran, but on the principle that even a stopped clock is right twice a day, you could at least pray that twice a day Donald Trump would be right. But if we continue with whoever it is that's running the White House now, if they, by some hook or crook, were to get another 4-year term, I'm not sure the world will still be here by the end of it.
There's a slim chance that Donald Trump does the right thing. There's a zero chance that Joe Biden does the right thing, and when he does, it's for his own self. And you talked about Assange earlier. That was a very smart move, but to his political benefit. I mean, the reason to like Donald Trump is that he's hated by all the right people, and that's kind of about it. And I think the only thing that protects us from doing something stupid in China or elsewhere is that he's afraid that it will damage his reputation. You remember back when he was president the first time, and all the lies, the pack of lies came out about the chemical attack in Syria. Now, he could have gone all in and really showed them, what for. But he wanted to protect his reputation, so he basically said, okay, guys, give me a target that's not going to kill anyone. I'll blow up a building or two, no big deal, and I can claim victory. So it's kind of his own sense of, his self-esteem, his sense of arrogance that ironically prevents him from doing something extremely stupid.
Yeah, I see it that way too. I'll not be happy if Donald Trump is the next president of the United States, but I'll be very happy that Joe Biden isn't. And that's just about the size of it. But I wanted to, as you are from the libertarian school of thought, both Senators Paul, Rand, and Ron would loosely be called, at least over here, would be called libertarian people. RFK was supposed to be the libertarian option here. Down with foreign wars, down with corporate malfeasance and corruption, hostile to big pharma, hostile to the military-industrial complex, hostile to the three-letter agencies that murdered his uncle and his father. But he went completely berserk on the issue of Israel-Palestine. Have you any insight into that?
Well, the thing, the thing about RFK's candidacy is not that it was necessarily an appeal to libertarians. He was a threat to the uniparty, to the duopoly in the U.S., because he had a broad appeal, because a lot of progressives were interested in him. A lot of people like my friend Glenn Greenwald, people like that, were interested in a candidate who could appeal to progressives and libertarians on important issues while stepping aside on issues that we don't necessarily share. He was a perfect candidate for that until something strange happened. If you remember, he had made a couple of comments about COVID, and he praised one of your great bass players from Pink Floyd, who has been a great champion of the Palestinian people. And all of a sudden there was a backlash. And what we thought was going to be a pro-peace RFK turned into a pro-peace but RFK. And not only did he do, like, for example, I worked with Dr. Paul on the Hill as his foreign affairs advisor. Dr. Paul was always, of course I'm pro-Israel. I don't want to arm them. I don't want to fund them, but I don't want to harm them. So the best thing we can do is leave them alone. He could have done something like that, but instead he overcompensated so much, and he continues to do so to this day, so much that he frittered away with possibility he had to possibly even become elected president. He was putting forth something brand new that was interesting, that was a kind of a melding. So I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he got some kind of phone call. People speculate about blackmail. I don't know if it's as simple as that. But we do know that the CIA has deep roots in American politics, and RFK himself blames the CIA for killing his dad and uncle. So who knows what kind of a call he got, or what was presented to him.
Who knows? I hope we one day do. Finally, and I'm grateful for your time, Daniel, we've asked the question, who will win Thursday's Biden-Trump debate? Can you bear to watch it? And if you do, who do you think is going to win it?
Well, George, there's a fine line between tragedy and comedy. So the way that I've survived these 3 years of the Biden administration is that in the tragedy of Joe Biden, I found an enormous amount of comedy, and I find myself replaying his clips because it does remind you. But I would say Donald Trump is right. Let's take a drug test, because they're probably filling him full of happy juice. I will say one thing, though. Whoever it was, and it certainly was not Joe Biden, whoever it was who called up the Justice Department and said, we got to get Assange out, it was a brilliant move. because it's going to give Joe Biden one good thing. He's not going to talk about the economy. He's not going to talk about foreign policy. He has one very good thing to say on that stage, which is that, Donald Trump, you're the man responsible for all the charges. You could have got all the charges dropped against Assange. You're responsible for what happened. I've been working on a deal for a long time, and I got him freed. And that is a pretty big thing right now. So that's pretty much the only thing he has to pull out of his back pocket. But Trump's a great talker. Joe's not. It'll be interesting. I'll watch it. Yeah, I might have a bottle of whiskey with me, but I'll watch it.
I wonder if the referee will stop the fight because the president's taking too much punishment. He will, of course, have something in his ear, and as you say, something that he's taken between his lips. He'll be pumped up with whatever happy juice is necessary. But that doesn't mean his trousers might not fall down. If that happens, it will be the television event of the century. Daniel McAdams, a real pleasure to talk to you. Please give our regards to Dr. Paul and to Senator Paul. Daniel McAdams, Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace. Thank you for joining us. Who will win Thursday's Biden-Trump debate? Biden or Trump? You decide. After the break, let's go to Seattle, Washington, to talk with Nathan about Assange. Stay tuned. There is hope. The hope is in our numbers. We're already boycotting all kinds of products, and it's working. They're all reporting significant drops in profit. We need to boycott. We need to protest often in numbers and with imagination. When we get the opportunity to vote out the parties that are supporting the genocide, we must take them. And if that opportunity isn't yet available in your area, you need to make it. You need to join with people intelligently, shrewdly, in a way that will punish the incumbent genocide enabler. You can link up your church with another church, your trade union with another trade union, your community organization, your nursery, whatever, with another in Palestine. You need to reach out to them so that they know that people in Canada and in Britain and everywhere in the world are thinking about them, because that is important for their morale. We're entitled to feel a kind of gut-wrenching sadness at what is going. We're entitled for our hearts to be broken, but we're not entitled to allow our spirits to be broken, because the people there are depending on our spirits.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to Nathan in Seattle on Assange. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, George, I am a big Assange supporter. I love the fact that he's out. However, this is not like a celebratory situation for people like myself, because I'm of the belief that he's been prosecuted by our government for 15 years, and the people who went after him are still free, while he's, barely escaping jail, probably a massive cognitive decline, way out of his element when it comes to publishing documents, because he's been so disconnected from the population. For me to get excited, like, we need to have people like Assange in positions of power going after the people who went after him. And I would like, you have a platform.
I think that's brilliantly stated. Yeah, I think that's brilliantly stated, Nathan. It troubles me that Julian has not yet spoken. His lawyers have spoken, his wife has spoken, but we haven't yet seen his lips move and heard his current state of health. There were very disturbing rumors about the decline in his health, as anybody unjustly incarcerated in the dungeon of Belmarsh, kind of Devil's Island in the middle of London, would undoubtedly suffer. For an innocent man to be in amongst some of the worst offenders in the world, mass murderers, terrorists, it's almost unthinkable, and yet it happened. 4 or 5 long years and more, it happened. So I don't know when we'll hear from Julian. I don't know if he'll ever work again, but I pray that both of these come to pass before very long. Now, a quick reminder, the MOATS podcast is charting in over 100 countries. That's consistent now. It's #1 in Thailand this week for politics on Apple. So thank you for downloading it. You can get it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. It will take you to wherever you get your podcasts from. Let's stay in America. Arthur is in Chicago on workers. Go ahead, Arthur.
Hi, how do I sound?
Yeah, good. Loud and clear, mate.
Excellent, excellent. How you doing, Mr. Galloway?
By the grace of God, good, thanks.
Show, from the great city of Chicago. And my question here revolves around cooperation. What are your opinions on cooperation between the Free America movement, headed by Haas and Hinkle over here, and then the Worker Party from Great Britain, which you lead so nobly over there? What do you think about cooperation between both organizations?
Well, we don't establish sister parties as such. We took a decision early on not to do that. We thought it vainglorious because we were a tiny party at the beginning. Now that we are very much bigger, more than 10 times bigger than we were on the 1st of February of this year, making us easily the fastest growing party in the country. We may have to revisit that time. Jackson Hinkle is a frequent guest on the show and indeed a stand-in host on the show. So on a personal level, we have the best possible relations with him. So let's kick that down the road until after the election. We see how we've done and we see what lessons need to be drawn from that. But the overarching point I think you are by inference making is that the United States cannot go on with this duopoly, so-called Republican and Democrat choice, when no choice is available, when one is at least as bad as the other, and the only alternatives are people like the Greens, whose candidate I very greatly admire, Dr. Jill Stein, but with whom I have many important political disagreements. It would not be normal for me to support the Greens because I've seen them up close and personal in Britain, in Ireland, in Germany, in Australia, and in other places. But in the current electoral imbroglio in the US, all I can do is encourage people to vote for the Greens and Dr. Jill Stein, but we can't go on like that. And as this show proves, increasingly we are two countries not divided by a common language, in the words of Oscar Wilde, but united by a common language and by common neoliberal, neocon, warmongering governments. And so I'm not trying to recolonize you or anything, and neither do I want you to colonize us, but cooperation between the British and the American socialist movements seems to me inescapable, ineluctable, and I look forward to playing a role in that. Thank you, Arthur. On the YouTube comments, by the way, if you can't get through on the phone or don't want to get through on the phone, send comments in the YouTube chat because they're all read and the best of them will be put up on the screen for me to read if I can get to them all. Jack Plugman, great name, says in court they had Julian in an Eichmann box like a war criminal to protect the real war criminals. BB in an Eichmann box next. The irony. yeah, when exposing criminals becomes a crime, then you're being run by criminals. It's obvious. Nicola Curtin, good friend of the show, says, I'm still boiling mad about the introduction to his interview with George Galloway by Aaron Bastani, he made it sound as though George Galloway was coming to murder us all. What a load of nonsense. Just want to show how full of hate Bastani is. Thanks, Nicola. In the wake of the release of Julian Assange, that Novara Media and the creatures within look pretty tawdry tonight. Joe Dear Bird says, I see you have a poll on the debate here, but I don't see the box. Who cares? A very good point. Both are much the same, greedy, war-loving crooks. And you can't handle the truth, says, imagine you live in the so-called free world where people who conduct genocides make billions and those who report their crimes live in jail. Beautifully, beautifully expressed. And Omar Rana says, pay Assange reparations. Instead of paying him reparations, he's going to have to pay them for a private jet which they ordered him to fly in, not allowing him to fly commercial. John is in London on Palestine. Go ahead, John.
Hello. First of all, I like about Palestinian Muslim, and I would like to ask you a question about the modern day issues that are faced in the Middle East and Palestine specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think the West spends a lot of money and a lot of energy to try and make us look like we're the bad ones when we live between you and we don't have any issues with you?
Who's we and who's you?
I'm Palestinian by origin, and I look in the media and I look at government statements, and that's what I mean by we. Why do you think that government spends so much to protect Israel's crimes when, matter of fact, we are the victims of that oppression and we're struggling to get our voices out there? Why do you think the governments and the media spend so much to suppress us and keep the genocide quiet?
Well, there's a long list of reasons, but probably premier amongst them is that the crime was ours. The original sin belongs here in London, in the building in which I've sat for 37 years on and off, in the Palace of Westminster. That's where the original crime was committed, in the Balfour Declaration, when, on behalf of one people, a promise was made to a second people of the land that belonged to a third people. And as Mr. Churchill put it, we began the descent down the bloody staircase, and we are descending still. So that would be one obvious reason why the British state cannot acknowledge the true right and wrong in this story, despite the fact that the Zionist terror gangs, led by two people who went on to become prime ministers of Israel, Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir, leaders of the Irgun and the Stern gang that murdered countless British soldiers and officials in bombs, in sniping attacks, in knifings in alleyways, hanged two British sergeants by piano wire in an orange grove in Haifa, despite the fact that 93 British officials were murdered in the King David Hotel explosion, despite the fact that a member of the British Parliament, Lord Moyne, was murdered at point-blank range by the aforementioned later Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Shamir, shot in the face and killed. Despite all of that, the British state has to pretend that the Palestinians are the terrorists, but the Israelis are the victims of terrorism. And you'll see when you watch the PiersMorgan interview with me later this evening, that still commands the heights of the mainstream media and the mainstream political class. But there are other reasons. The British set up Israel so that it could be in the words of a British cabinet minister at the time, a loyal little Jewish Ulster in a sea of hostile Arabism. We no longer need that because we're the tail of the dog, not the top dog. But America needs it. It needs to keep the Arabs divided and weak, needs to keep them defending fake borders that were drawn for them by an Englishman and a Frenchman, Sykes and Picot, need to keep the puppet presidents and the corrupt kings in their places, the better for Western countries to plunder their wealth and to sell weapons to these dictatorships as part of a Faustian pact to keep them in power as long as they will share some of their petrodollars with us. As for the rest of it, it gets a bit uncomfortable. The truth is, this is the truth. If I had been a friend of Israel instead of a friend of Palestine, I might be in number 10 Downing Street right now. I might be running to be the Prime Minister of Britain right now. I might have been already the Foreign Secretary of Britain before now. Why not? I have the experience, I have the ability, I have the knowledge. Why have I not been and will never be any of those things? And the answer is that if you support Palestine, you have the mark of Cain upon your forehead, and you will never prosper in British politics or in American politics, even less in American politics. And that's because of the political power of the pro-Israel lobby on both sides of the Atlantic. I mentioned earlier the example of Representative Jamal Bowman. $16 million was spent in one tiny district by AIPAC to destroy a Democratic representative because he didn't wholeheartedly enough support Israel's crimes in Gaza. Go figure. Joe Manchin for Congress says, I can't vote in your poll because Dr. Jill Stein will win the debate, because the US voters will see exactly how awful the two criminal candidates are with the two parties of war and Wall Street really are. And Martin Kicks says France had the Dreyfus scandal and Britain has the Assange scandal. Very good point. The Happy Little Fox, aka Benji, says George Galloway and PiersMorgan, it's a battle of wits. It's a battle of wits, of which PiersMorgan is only half prepared. Thank you. On line 2 is Asif in Eastham on Israel. Go ahead, Asif.
Oh, hello, George. My admiration grows for you every day, and I put my vote in for your chosen candidate in Eastham. I have to say...
Thank you very much, sir.
I've been watching the shocking videos from Israel online recently in the West Bank. Israel used a police dog to attack a 66-year-old Palestinian woman in her home. They just burst in and they had the dog attack her and viciously maul her.
Unbelievable.
Isn't that
Unbelievable. And Asif, it was their camera. The camera was on the savage dog. As it savaged a woman as old as my mother, sitting in her house. And they leaked the video.
Yes.
I've never seen anything quite like it. Have you?
No, I've never seen anything like it. And I saw from another person online that it's not the first time it's happened. Apparently they've done it in Lebanon as well. But you know,
they did it in the West Bank to little boys. But somehow an late 80s woman sitting in her house being savaged by a powerful attack dog with a camera on its back and with its handler encouraging the savage attack. You know, look, for me, it takes the biscuit. We've seen lots of things. much worse. Children with no heads, children with their heads open and nothing in them, children with no legs, babies being slaughtered, unborn babies being slaughtered. We've seen it all, haven't we? But somehow, a savage dog attacking an elderly lady in our house, and the criminal filming it and then putting the video out, that takes the biscuit for me. Asif, last word to you, my friend.
Well, you know the thing that really gets up my goat is all the Zionists online actually cheered for this, and they've been cheering, and they said like things like "well done" and extremely ridiculous wild comments. I don't understand how.
Do you know where the dog came from?
Investigating this.
Do you know where the dog came from, Asif? This savage dog that was set upon an elderly lady.
It was an Israeli police dog.
It was given to the Israeli forces by the Netherlands. They trained that dog. Nice Netherlands, tulips from Amsterdam, free dope smoking by the canal, all flowers, peace, love, harmony, understanding. The Netherlands trained that savage dog and gave it to these Israeli criminals. And do you know who was the Prime Minister? Who did it? Who gave it? The next head of the NATO war machine, the former Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Thanks, Asif. I've got a break now, but right after that break, it's the one and only Craig Murray, former British ambassador, human rights activist, historian, and I earnestly hope soon to be member of the British Parliament. Stay tuned. Betrayal, abandonment, disappointment. These are the prevailing emotions amongst voters in this general election. Betrayal of the working people, their living standards, where they live, where they work, or where they used to work. Take Gaza, for example. Millions of Labour voters, the great majority of Labour voters, have been horrified at the show they've been watching on their telephones, on their tablets, on their screens. Their children are even watching. Other children having their heads blown off. Other women having their limbs torn off. Other men scrambling in the rubble, trying to find at least the bodies of their loved ones. And they've looked on in horror as both British political parties supported Israel from the beginning of this genocide right up until this day. They know that these politicians are not reflecting what the public want to see. The public demand a ceasefire, but the political leaders press on regardless. In fact, Keir Starmer whipped his own MPs not to vote for it and sacked those MPs that disobeyed him. Well, the majority of people are asking, what's the point of voting for these two cheeks of the same backside if they stand for exactly the same thing? And most people want to give these two cheeks a good hard kicking. Look at the rights of working people, how they've disappeared in this country over the last 40, 50 years. Once upon a time, this country was built by and for the working class. Now it's for the bankers in the city of London, those who think work is fooling around on a computer screen, who think Swarfiga is a Balearic island. This once great industrial power of Britain is what we have to strive to bring back, with respect for the working people who built our wealth as a country in the first place. Look at the situation in the National Health Service. We've got millions of people waiting for urgently needed medical treatment, and somebody's got to pull Britain out of this death spiral. and it won't be either of the miniatures that are running for Prime Minister today. This was once a great Britain. It has to be made great again. The Workers' Party are on a barnstorming tour, the length and breadth of this country, to offer vision, hope, and to offer a little splash of colour to a dull, grey political scene. You know me, you know that I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. Give us a try, you'll see a real difference. Workers' Party, General Election 2024.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Our candidates are having a live press conference right now in East London over the extraordinary double-barreled attack on the Bangladeshi community by the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, and simultaneously one of his factotums, the treacherous John Ashworth. That's how we know it isn't misinformation, Mr. Starmer, because not only did we see your lips move, not only did we hear you say it, your wingman went out and said exactly the same thing on your behalf. Now, you may have taken leave of your senses. You certainly have taken leave of tens of thousands of Bangladeshi formerly Labour voters who will now be voting for the Workers' Party or for independence all over this country. It is the one massive blunder of the campaign, and nobody noticed it except me. Check the timeline. Check who was the first to highlight it. Check who gave the first speech and denunciation against it. Check who gave the second speech later in the evening last night against it. How is it that I am the person who has to reveal these things? Where's the media? If that had been Rishi Sunak or Jeremy Corbyn, the media would have pounced on it. It's a great story. It's a blunder, a gaffe, a potentially election-turning mistake. What's not newsworthy about that? I'll tell you why it's not newsworthy. Because the news business is nothing to do with news. It is a political conspiracy on behalf of the powerful. And that's why so many people are watching the mother of all talk shows. That's why so many people are watching Glenn Greenwald. It's why so many people are watching Russell Brand, watching The Grey Zone, far more than watch any television, news or politics program. Far more. Do the maths. Young people, people under 30 now, never mind young people, anybody under 30 never watches the TV. Never. I was discussing this with Morgan when we recorded this show yesterday. None of his children watch television. None of my children watch television. Even if they are watching television, they're watching it on their phone, not on the television in the cabinet with the doors, like a cocktail cabinet that I grew up watching. That's all done. When I went into Murdoch Towers to make the Morgan debate broadcast, one of Morgan's men said, "Where is your studio?" I said, "It's in this case. This small suitcase is where my studio is. I don't have a suite in Murdoch Towers, and I wouldn't want one. I've got a good wife who films, who records, who produces, who helps direct, who finds interesting guests, who does the social media roundup. That's what I've got. Just me and my good wife, and a case with a studio inside it. Don't be fooled into thinking I'm in central London now. I'm in Rochdale, in a car showroom, above a big pile of really nice cars for sale in Crawford Street in Rochdale. That's where I am. But I could be in Timbuktu with my case, and I'd still be able to have the mother of all talk shows with you. That's what we mean by real free media. Now, having sung that paean of praise to my good wife, I've just had a very touching mail from Kevin Hopkins in Greece, who rebuked me for taking Gayatri for chips after every show. She deserves, he said, not just roses, but dinner in the Rochdale Ritz. The Rochdale Ritz is not yet open, but if I get another 5-year term here, who knows what might become possible. Now, Craig Murray is currently on the line with Roger Waters, so you can understand why he's not in a hurry to come and join me. I'm only the leader of his party. But I'd rather be on the phone to Roger Waters than Craig Murray, so I understand exactly where he's coming from. I'm waiting for Roger Waters to come and do a concert in Blackburn and in Rochdale. And I honestly hope he brings the king, Eric Clapton, with him. Wouldn't that be a fine thing? While we're waiting for all of them, let's go to the legend that is Erobos in New York. Erobos, as always, welcome to the show.
Salubrious evening, greetings and salutations to the future, once again, Minister of Parliament for the 7th time, and hopefully one day, Prime Minister. I came to have it out with Galloway.
8th time, by the way, Erobos. 8 is my lucky number. I hope to reach it next Thursday.
The 8th wonder of the world.
Yes, quite so.
I wanted to have a more blessings to your family and the audience, of course, and the fine staff that's there, wherever they are. I wanted to mention a few words about Jamal Bowman. Basically, he was part of that fraud squad. You know, I have another name for them, and I'm not going to elucidate on right now, but it begins with an S. Basically, they wasted their political capital. I don't know if you remember a little thing Jimmy Dore started called Forced to Vote, like maybe 4 years ago or so during the pandemic. Well, during all this time, you know, the whole purpose of these so-called Justice Democrats, and they have another name, but basically they're just Democrats with the accoutrement, the identity. The whole thing is identity first with them. They're very much Trotskyites in a sense. Identity first to the exclusion of everything else. And so they wasted all their political capital. The district that Bowman is from is right next to Richie Torres' district, who's an AIPAC ghoul. And those are the two poorest congressional districts in the entire country, in a country that has massive poverty. Wow. And so when we were pushing him, and when I say we were part of the coalition, the People's Party, and many other coalitions were pushing them to hold the leverage that they had, because when they were reelected during COVID, they were the ones that were going to decide whether or not can't fail legislation was going to pass. So like the defense spending and all this crap, right? And what did they do? Instead of bending the knee, they went down on all fours and they were licking Pelosi's, nasty Nancy Pelosi's Pradas, right? And eating her ice cream and taking selfies. They didn't fix a single pothole. They didn't take a single homeless person off the street in the Bronx, you know, and then they went about doing all this screaming at Republicans in the hallway and all of this performative nonsense. And unfortunately for Bowman, he found his conscience too late, right? Palestine is a great issue, but he had 4 years to do something about the poor people in his constituency, right? There are many things he could have done on the federal level, dealing with the public housing and all this stuff. He did nothing. So, you know, even though this Mortimer guy, Latimer, whatever he is, from AIPAC, they came in and they poured all that money. If he dealt with the people, you know, like gave weekly reports, like the stuff you did, right, and report back and say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, he would have easily crushed Latimer. But you have people, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, because I know time is always against us, as Morpheus told Neil. Up there, and even here in where I live, in my district, you have people in the richest country in the history of the world that send their children to get a hot meal and do laundry, wash their clothes in a public school, right? So stuff like that he could have addressed. He could have done something. And because he didn't do any of that, but the rest of the fraud squad, lame squad, garbage squad, you know, they're just Democrats. You know, this is why he suffered the fate. He did it to himself. It was self-inflicted harm on protecting Nancy Pelosi, she who holdeth the purse strings of the Democratic Party. And, you know, he got what he deserved, and he did it to himself. So I just wanted to mention that, and thank goodness Julian Assange
Well, it's
is free.
a very, thank you, Arobos. It's a very useful corrective, and everyone will have heard very clearly what you have said, and I'm sure, because I know you, that every word of that is accurate. But at the end of the day, AIPAC didn't spend $16 million in one constituency. If I tell you that the entire spend in my constituency in Rochdale for what I hope will be a winning campaign is £18,000, call it $20,000. AIPAC spent $16 million to defeat Bowman. Not because he didn't fix a pothole or take a single poor person out of poverty, though I'm sure he failed spectacularly on all those things. They did it to teach him a lesson, that if you stand up against Israel in any way, shape or form, we will crush you like a beetle underneath, whatever it costs. Thanks, Arobos. Here are the numbers. It's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And in the rest of the world, 44203 966 2625. And a big welcome, as always, to the second hour with those listening on KPFK. That's 90.7 FM in Los Angeles and across Southern California. Let's go to our old friend, Terence, in Norwich, in England. Terence, as always, big welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Good evening, and it's nice to see you in a jocular mood. I just thought I'd give you this little story yesterday. I was talking to 5 postgraduates, all under the age of 25, and I said that you want to listen to the truth. And they said, what is the truth? Obviously, they're watching on their phones, I guess, like you said earlier. I said the truth is people like George Galloway, people like Gideon Levy, people across the world like Joe Stover. You obviously haven't read these things. You do know politics. One little boy said to me, George Galloway, he's only just been in Parliament. And I just laughed and I said, well, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you that he'll win quite easily in Rochdale. I'll have 2 Arthur Guinnesses with you. And he took me up on the bet. So I think that you will be responsible for me having 2 pints of Guinness off these poor postgraduates in the very rich southeast of England who have no idea about reality. What say you?
Unbelievable. Well, unbelievable. But I'll tell you, talking about the young, I spoke to a schoolgirl today who told me that her school assignment in Rochdale, her school assignment was to write about a global conflict, but she was not allowed to write about Israel-Palestine. I'm going to take it up with the school after the polls, if re-elected as the Member of Parliament. Terence, as always, lovely to hear from you. Elensky says, I voted Biden in the poll. You know why? Trump is going to be decimated on freedom of speech in the Assange case. Yeah, right. Biden decimating anybody. You'll be lucky to keep his trousers up. Pen Dog says, don't forget it was Australian PM Julia Gillard who first cancelled Julian's passport back in 2010. She apparently now works at a US think tank. Tank, I said. And Mine Cara says, Vivienne Westwood was a great supporter of Assange. Shame she missed his release. Indeed, and the late and great John Pilger too. Michael Mundy says, George, many older people among us have turned away from legacy media and their complicity, lies and misrepresentations. That's true. One shouldn't always characterize this shift as being merely the prerogative of the young. Many, many older people no longer watch mainstream media either. Mr. Cool Mug says, God bless George's ingenious wife, Gayatri. Yes, indeed. May God bless her. On the line from Glasgow is the legend that is Sarkar. Sarkar, welcome back.
Oh, George, thank you so much for taking my call. First of all the best for the election. If one George Galloway is rattling them from the Workers' Party, just imagine a few more come in. They'll be running for cover, George. And NHS is short-staffed. They cannot help them.
Exactly.
Okay, now, George, a very serious question. Now, first of all, if anyone thinks I'm talking nonsense, never take my call. Full disclaimer. I'm not a fan of Kim Jong-un blindly, nor am I a fan of Putin. This is with regards to the deal, the pact they have, that if one of them gets attacked, the other will help them. The Western media calling all sorts of things. Oh, my God, a deal between two dictators. Oh, my God, China is bringing all these people together. George, before I was born, NATO have been bombing Palestine. When I was at school, for 80 days, they bombed Yugoslavia. When I went to uni, they bombed Iraq. When I started working, they bombed Libya. When I have kids, they have been bombing Yemen. And when I have grandkids, I don't know whom they'll bomb. Every stage before my life till my life, I have seen NATO bombing someone or the other. How the hell is a deal between Kim Jong-un and Putin a threat to anyone? Somebody solve me this riddle. I've been blocked on Twitter when I said this to one of the journalists, and my account has been deactivated when I exposed the hypocrisy of Ukraine. There's no free speech. Anybody, whatever the media tries to feed you, it's like people buy that. Of course, it's getting better now. People are becoming sensible. But how is a deal between Putin and Kim Jong a threat for any of us? Somebody explain that to me, George.
Nobody can, and nobody can put it quite like you do. There will always be freedom of speech here on the mother of all talk shows. That's why you are a legendary contributor to it. But the facts are that the two governments of two nuclear-powered states have formed an alliance that if one of them is attacked, the other will come to its aid. I think a similar article exists between nuclear-armed states in an organization called NATO. I think they have an article that says if anyone attacks Britain, France and the United States have to come to its aid, and vice versa. If it's good for the goose, why isn't it good for the gander? As I always say. Now, coming up is Craig Murray when he's finished talking to some guy, Roger Waters, Pink Floyd. Who were they? I'll be right back.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down, the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. he should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Well, the deputy leader of the Labour group in Tower Hamlets in East London, where I used to represent as a Member of Parliament, has just resigned from the Labour Party over Keir Starmer's attack on the Bangladeshi community. A very, very significant development indeed. And I call on all Bangladeshi members of the Labour Party, you shouldn't even have been in it. You should have left it long ago, but if you don't leave it now, what reputation can you possibly retain? Follow Councillor Sabina Akhtar, Deputy Leader of the Tower Hamlets Labour Group, and resign without delay. Otherwise be condemned forever as a wretch. Now, if you follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway, you'll get all kinds of goodies, but two of them will be my two wonderful movies that I made with my good wife Gayatri, The Killings of Tony Blair and Killing Kelly, and that's the excerpts that you've just been watching. You'll get that entirely free of charge. We need the income from Patreon to keep this show on the road. That's its only purpose. If you want to keep this show on the road, then please, if you can spare the price of a cup of tea per week, that's all, then please follow me on Patreon. James Gerard Brown says Assange is not an indefatigable revolutionary warrior. The dude has been incarcerated for defending freedom for years now and needs a break from the crazy world we're all in. And Anthony Wedgwood, how I wish. I previously made the prediction that Labour will get less votes in total than Corbyn in 2017. My other prediction is that if Reform gets 50 to 100 seats, the establishment media will blame Russia. And DP7 says, is PiersMorgan related to JP Morgan? What an interesting question. I wish I'd asked it. Okay, on line 2 is Shamir in Pakistan, who is all of 11 years old. Well, my dear, you are the youngest ever caller to the mother of all talk shows, and you are very, very welcome.
Hello, George. I'm pleased to be on your show, and I've asked my parents this question many times, and I don't think I got a satisfactory answer, and I'd like to ask you. I thought that maybe you could help me understand.
Go on.
That some people say that the Palestinians don't deserve their land because the land is the historical homeland of the Jewish people. And I would like to understand what the conflict on that point would be.
Well, first of all, the people who took the land in 1948 in the 20th century have no connection whatsoever to the Jews that lived in a part of Palestine many thousands of years ago. They are entirely different people, which is why DNA tests are illegal in Israel. Secondly, where would we be if everyone could claim the land that they said their ancestors lived in 2,000 years ago? The Romans could return to much of the known world at the time and say this was Roman land. We lived here. Our DNA is here. That wall there was built by us. We're claiming it back, and we're going to build a new Rome. Or you could stick to the Holy Land itself. If you can have a so-called Jewish state, a term which I completely reject, because there are millions of Jews around the world who have nothing to do and want nothing to do with the state of Israel. What if the Canaanites were to say, we want to refound a Canaanite state because we were there not 2,000 but 3,000 years ago? What if the Persians or the Ottomans were to demand land of people living there now because hundreds of years ago they lived there? If someone turned up at your home, Shamir, and said, the Bible told me that this house belongs to me because 2,000 years ago, my ancestors, whom I can't prove to have anything to do with me whatsoever, this was their land, and so I'm taking your house, and you can go and live in the garden or live in exile in a refugee camp. I mean, that would be a recipe for absolute chaos in the world, wouldn't it, Shamir?
Yeah. I agree.
Excellent. I'm glad I persuaded you. Give my regard to your parents, please. Prince is on the line in Texas about Gaza. Go ahead, Prince. We've lost him. Big numbers this week for the podcast in Malta, Cyprus, Gambia, and Oman, all in the top 10 in those countries. MOATS is still essentially the first #1 political podcast of its type in the world. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Brian Holden says, the West lied about the Soviet Union, and now they're lying about China. Okay, coming up, Craig Murray, historian, British ambassador, human rights activist, and parliamentary candidate. He's coming up shortly, but let me read a couple more messages. Bob Cosmic, we are carrying water in a basket, trying to put out a fire that we ourselves started. The insanity of humanity. Very well said, Bob. Ori Kennel Herbsman says, Mr. Galloway, what is your reply when people greet you in Arabic with Salam Alaikum? I've asked around, but now I look like a fool to my Arab neighbors. If someone says Salam Alaikum to you, you answer, Wa Alaikum Salam. Peace on you. If you want to go the full Monty, you would say, Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah barakatuh. So try that on your Arab neighbors. Jack Plugman is back again. He says, Tony Blair looks like Howard Hughes. That's very funny. On a codeine drip in 1974. He does look what he is, I must say. And J.R. Bradbury says, George, did you ever fly Libyan Jamahariya Airlines? I'm sure I saw you once on a flight out to Tripoli. Sorry, sir, I've never flown on Libyan Jamahariya Airlines. I have never flown into or out of Tripoli on any airline. I've only ever been in Libya by vehicle on my epic siege-busting convoys to Iraq and to Gaza. Prince is back in Texas about Gaza and the U.S. We better hear him. Go ahead, Prince.
Hey, George. How you doing?
All good, brother. What would you like to say?
Keeping the world informed. Yeah, just talking about Gaza. So at this point, I'm sure the blessing about October 7 is that it's eroded every iota of pretense. At this point, I don't know if, Anthony Blinken, I don't know who he represents, the United States or Israel, or the entire State Department, Matt Miller and all those other people who talk. I don't know what they represent. Secondly, it's very clear now, they kind of try to scare people with this anti-Semitic nonsense. But it's clear from Jamal Bowman, even though I think he's a fraud, it's clear from him being ousted because he criticized Israel that Israel controls the United States. And it's not an anti-Semitic trope. It's just a point of fact. So there's no need to pretend anymore because it shows that if you oppose the state of Israel, you're going to get kicked out of your position. So Israel basically controls the United States. Now, about the U.S. election, I don't even know what to everybody.
Yeah, it's a very foolish move on their part because he was no threat to them. They have crushed a butterfly on a wheel, although he doesn't quite qualify as a butterfly for me. They have crushed him needlessly. He was pointless, powerless. He had no influence on anybody or anything. To spend $16 million to crush him merely proves the point that you have just made, that the Israel lobby in the United States, who are not Israeli, they're Americans, are not Jewish for the most part, but Christians, that they are controlling the political process in the United States. Why go out of your way to make that so brazenly obvious? To get rid of who? Jamal Bowman. Prince, thanks for the call. Going to New York, where John wants to talk about David Miliband. How intriguing. Go ahead, John.
Hey, good evening, sir. Thank you very much for taking my call. Yes, I was reaching out to you because I've noticed in my neck of the woods here in New Jersey, New York area, there's this IRC, or International Rescue Committee, booths popping up all over, requesting money specifically for the children of Gaza. That's what they spoke about, and it drew my attention. I have 3 children, and I'm devastated by what I've seen. I have PTSD, really. And, I couldn't donate directly. They wouldn't take cash. So I went and did some, research, and I noticed his connections to the Labor Party and his previous, relationship with the politics in your neck of the woods.
Clinton, they're big friends of Clinton.
Yeah, and I also noticed that the organization was founded, according to Wikipedia, in 1933 by Albert Einstein as a way to help people, refugees, and which is a great thing. But I just want to know, from your perspective, if you think this is an altruistic organization, and if you could recapitulate any company or organizations that you've probably already announced that we could donate that are actually getting success in getting things to Gaza.
Well, I don't recommend anybody. People have to do their own due diligence on that. I myself would not give money to the Emergency Rescue Corporation, for that is what it is, because much of the money, a ridiculous amount of the money, close to $1 million of the money, goes to pay David Miliband, who's already more than wealthy enough. So if I were you, I'd find more suitable organizations to donate money to. But I salute you and your family for your good intentions. I think your intentions are honorable and true, and they will hopefully be regarded as such by the Almighty on the Judgment Day. David Miliband's actions over many years as a chief ally and aide and minister for Tony Blair's warmongering, torturing, extraordinary renditioning criminal gang, I'm not so sure. We finally got the Right Honourable Craig Murray, former British ambassador, historian, human rights activist, and a man that's just been on the phone with Roger Waters. I'm not offended. I'd rather be on the phone to Roger Waters than to you. That happens in life. But I wanted to talk to you, and we're short of time now, about your friend and mine, your ally and mine, the great Julian Assange, now free as a bird in Australia, at least for now. Tell us how you felt when you woke up to that news.
Well, it was
amazing. I mean, overwhelmed with happiness, I suppose. And I think like many people who are close to the campaign and close to the family, I cried a lot because I've been working for this for well over a decade, and to see it actually happen before your eyes, and especially to see, to first have a prospect of and then to see Stella and reunited with Julian and know he's going to be back with his little children, or he's really going to be with them for the first time. They've only ever been able to see him in a maximum security prison in a situation where Stella even stopped taking them because huge aggressive sniffer dogs were set on the little kids every time they went into that jail. So, to see the family out of that situation was overwhelming. And for me, the personal emotion overtook the intellectual analysis for a while.
Why do you think Biden blinked?
Well, this is a victory for the people. This is a victory for all of those, including you and including me and including probably almost all of your listeners who did anything in the campaign for Julian over the years. And we swung round public opinion, and we did that in the teeth of vicious opposition and vicious gutter press smear stories from the mainstream media who occasionally would do a pearl-clutching editorial about freedom of the press, but concentrated on character destruction of Julian to attempt to justify what was happening to him. So Biden had to do this because exactly the same people, the same demographic, which has been totally alienated by his support for genocide in Gaza, was being still further alienated by the notion of Julian Assange arriving in Washington in chains and the public ditching of the First Amendment. So Biden was forced into this politically, but it's because we swung the tide of public opinion that he was forced into it politically.
And yet, you see, we were told, how often we were told, that our campaign was small and ineffective, that we had the support of no mainstream media at all, that we were a nothing burger, really. And yet now it is claimed, was claimed on this very show this evening, that Joe Biden's #1 re-election policy will be that he freed Julian Assange, and that he'll come out swinging in the presidential debates tomorrow to say, I'm the man that saved free speech and freed Julian Assange. So it turns out we weren't ineffective after all.
Well, we certainly weren't ineffective after all, and it would be incredibly hypocritical of Biden to take that view. The chances of him remembering to say whatever it is he's been told to say appear to be fairly limited anyway, whatever the subject. But certainly it would be a piece of monumental hypocrisy. And of course, they've freed him on the basis of a ludicrous plea bargain. They're trying to have their cake and eat it, because of course they've actually attacked freedom of the speech, but freedom of the press, freedom of speech, by this coerced plea bargain deal, which nobody can take seriously, but which does set at least a lower court precedent for espionage charges being used against journalists. So really, there's no substance to that. But on the other hand, what else can Joe Biden come and put down as his achievements? Because that would be a very small list indeed.
Now, with your great knowledge of the world as a former ambassador, foreign office official, truly a man of the world, a Renaissance man, had you ever heard of the little place in the Mariana Islands that Julian had to touch down in a private jet at his expense in order to go through the farce of pleading guilty to something that had already been agreed with the U.S. Justice Department? Where is the Mariana Islands? What are the Mariana Islands, and why are they American?
Well, I think, this is a useful reminder that America is an empire. and wherever the Mariana Islands are, they need to be decolonized and decolonized soon. And I think maybe the Americans have made a mistake here, because they're now going to start off a worldwide campaign for the decolonization of somewhere nobody had ever heard of. So that's something we can all work on next.
Now, what happens next, Craig? A period of silence, no doubt, from Julian as he recovers his health and gets to know the children that he's only seen through a prison cell window. What happens? Does Julian retire now? Does WikiLeaks continue? How do we raise the $500,000 for Julian's private jet that the Americans ordered them to have?
Well, Julian is a great intellect. I mean, I think he is one of the most profound thinkers of our time. He's not just a great journalist who changed the shape of journalism forever. He's genuinely a great intellect, and this notion of scientific journalism, by which you have to reference and prove what you are saying as though you are writing a scientific paper with reference to original documents, that kind of, and the use of encrypted coding with sources, the use of encrypted drop boxes, all that was fantastic innovation 15 years ago. It's pretty well old hat now, and there are lots of sort of WikiLeaks clones all over the place. So I hope my friend Kristen at WikiLeaks won't be too upset if I say to him, I don't think WikiLeaks is cutting edge anymore. But Julian is a great intellect, and he will do something else. The last time I visited Julian in jail, I had a conversation with him about artificial intelligence and the implications of artificial intelligence. And I was astonished at the extent to which, on grounds of articles people had printed out and posted him and books he had read, which he was up to date with all the current debate on artificial intelligence. And of course, as always, the breadth of his intellect and the amount of thought he was putting into how to make this a boon to mankind and to avoid the dangers was truly impressive. So I think he will become a leader again in other fields of radical thought, and particularly radical thought in terms of limiting the power of state surveillance and control and the dangers of digital currency and all of that. So I think there's a huge field for Julian to be active in, and I think he'll be active and important. But I think to expect him to go back to what he was doing before would be mistaken. I don't think that is what he will do.
WikiLeaks AI. Now, again, with your great historical knowledge, you know, and I was talking about David Miliband just a moment ago, you know the extent to which the empire went over the last 25 years to extraordinarily rendition people, to put bags over their heads, to take them to black sites, to torture them and disappear them. All under, by the way, a Labour government here in Britain. You know all that they did. Is the Labour government in Australia trustworthy? Is Julian safe in Australia? Or ought he to look at moving elsewhere, in your view?
I should start by saying I think Julian wants to live in Australia. That seems to be something he's been. I have had conversations with him over the years on where he would go next, and Australia, and he does view Australia as home. I think the attempts of the Australian government to claim credit today for having achieved what they were forced, kicking and screaming, to do against their will, forced by massive Australian public opinion, and which they dragged their heels over. They offered the Americans amazing new deals on submarine bases, on Australia paying for American controlled submarine fleets. They did all of that without making Julian's release a condition of anything. So I was slightly sickened by the Australian politicians jumping on the bandwagon and trying to claim credit today. Julian won't be safe anywhere. I mean, Julian isn't safe anywhere. But the truth of the matter is that enemies of the neoliberal state and policy of the Western states and enemies of Zionism are not safe anywhere, any of us. As you know, you've been severely attacked before. You're not safe, I'm not safe. None of us who are opposing the powers who run this world will ever really be safe. So I think the notion of safety is perhaps an elusive one.
An old-fashioned one. Honourable Craig Murray, thank you for belatedly joining us after you'd had your talk with Roger Waters. Hope we'll see him soon. Craig Murray, thanks for joining us. Kieran in Hertfordshire on Starmer and Bangladesh. Go ahead, Kieran.
Hi, George. Yeah, great day for Julian Assange. I spent many evening down there at night. You did too. On memories of it. I was actually called to speak about what I think Starmer singled out the Bangladeshis. And I think...
Kieran, I honestly can't hear any of that. Hang up and call back, will you please? Bambala7 says, yay, fish and chips with salt and vinegar wrapped in brown paper. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm about to do, to take Gayatri out for some chips. Hilda von Machhausen says, Gayatri is a smart lady. I need a male version of Gayatri. And I'm not sure there is one. She's the most gifted, hardworking, loyal, and beautiful, and brilliant person I've ever met, which is why I can say with aplomb, what's rattling, Gayatri?
Hallelujah, Julian
You're
Assange
being widely complimented, but no one loves you more than me. Go ahead.
I was just praising the Lord for having our friend and our hero, Julian Assange, walking out as a free man. How unbelievable was it when we, in the early hours of Thursday, hours of the night, discovered that he was out of Belmarsh and was on a plane towards Australia. I mean, we still can't get over it, because the struggle for him and his legal team and his supporters was so real. It was so harsh. We almost didn't see the end of the tunnel, and here we are. We've reached it. The struggle was hard. The struggle was here, but
yes,
we prevailed.
Yes, and all of us who had the honor to be his friends, to visit him, to touch him, to learn from him, like you, like me, like Craig, and some who left us on the way, are justifiably proud of the role that we played, but proudest of Julian and Stella and their faithfulness and the way in which the campaign was based around the rock-solid solidity of both of them. It's a truly inspiring thing, and of course is a useful reminder that just because you cannot see the end of the tunnel doesn't mean that it's not coming up soon. You never know what's around the corner and when it will appear. What else have we got rattling?
Frank just wants to add, hail, hail, George. I've been a fan since Bishop Briggs was an altar boy. Julian has been freed. God is good. And Robin Hansman says, regarding Julian Assange's pleading guilty, he just has to say, when being interviewed about the validity of the plea, remember Galileo, i.e. Galileo recanted on fear of torture, but everyone knew the truth. Here we have, moving on towards the poll. Did you want to say something about that?
No, go ahead.
The poll asked who will win the Thursday's debate, Biden or Trump. The swing is obviously a majority towards Trump, because Biden is just, well, you've described it very colorfully, repeatedly, what we know of Biden. Hans Lack makes the point, did you hear that Trump is demanding a drug test because he fears that Biden will get drugged again? And pitchforks are coming, says, even though...
I'm certain that I don't think Joe Biden can cross the bedroom door without drugs. I think he's drugged up to his eyeballs. That's why he behaves so incredibly erratically, It's why he falls asleep at inauspicious occasions. It's why his bowels move in the most inauspicious occasions. It's all down to drugs that are keeping him alive, keeping him going, keeping him upright.
Do you mean pharmaceutical drugs or the ones that his son would be providing? People are asking.
What a very good question. What a very good question. Now, Gayatri, I've got a question for you. You Can't Handle the Truth says, didn't Gigi say the interview with PiersMorgan was almost 2 hours long? It's only 1 hour, 18 minutes. Now, that puzzles me because it was exactly 1 hour and 30 minutes long. Does that mean Piers has chopped some of it out? Or is that 1 hour, 18 minutes figure given on this message wrong? We'll have to check that out, won't we?
We'll have to check out. Well, speaking on that subject, may I add that if it is the case and he has chopped things out, I made a recording of the whole show whilst I was sitting watching the whole show, the whole interview taking place live. So beware of that.
How clever.
Yes, well,
it's only, I've just had confirmation. I've just had confirmation in my ear that it's only 1 hour, 18 minutes long, which means that 12 minutes has been excised. Where are the 12 minutes, Piers? What are the 12 minutes? We better dig deeper into this. Over a bag of chips, Gayatri, just right after this show. Thanks very much indeed. See you soon. Cyrus Shirazi says, Roger Waters, Cat Stevens should do a duet in Rochdale. Eric Clapton is good, but not in the same class. Cyrus, are you kidding? Eric Clapton. I once painted on a wall, God forgive me, I once painted on a wall when I was a young teenager, Clapton is God. He's not God, but he's definitely the king. If I could get Eric Clapton to come and play in the square outside the town hall in Rochdale, wow, then I'd know my work was complete. Now, coming up after this show at 9 p.m., you can search YouTube for PiersMorgan Uncensored. You'll see the full interview, or maybe not entirely the full interview. Here's a taster of what's to come.
You would trust Vladimir Putin more than Keir Starmer?
I wouldn't trust any of them if they told me what day it was today without checking. I don't trust automatically any politician. I check the facts. We lived through an era and were sacked because of the result of it, in which we were told certain things by our own leaders that turned out to be blatant lies.
Right.
I do think it's going to be worth watching, whether it's 1 hour 18 or the full Monty of 1 hour 30, and we'll clearly put out anything that's been left out of the show. I think it's worth watching. PiersMorgan is at the top of his profession as an interviewer. He does have some master classes on his record. The one on Baby Reindeer in particular was indeed a master class. But he doesn't often come up against opposition like me. And I don't know. I quite like him, as you know, if you're a regular. I know many people watching this won't understand that. I like him because when we had nobody else in the struggle to defend Iraq and to avoid the catastrophic Iraq war in 2003, we had only one ally in the British media, only one newspaper editor who was prepared to put their newspaper at the service of the anti-war movement, of which at that time I was a founder and one of the leaders. And I haven't forgotten that, because the Iraq war didn't just massacre 1 million people and counting. It didn't just perhaps permanently scar and deface the whole Arab world, the whole Muslim world, it didn't just send extremism and fanaticism cascading around the world. It didn't just lead to extraordinary rendition and torture in Guantanamo and all of that. It changed PiersMorgan's life and it changed mine. Only 3 people lost their job over opposing the Iraq War. Robin Cook, God rest his soul, was one. I was a second, and PiersMorgan was the third. So I'll always have something of a soft spot for him over that. But on Gaza and on Ukraine, he has been atrociously wrong. And whilst he labored mightily to give the impression that he could not even understand how I could take the positions that I do and that I did in this interview, was disingenuous. Because PiersMorgan knows why I take the views that I do, why I speak the words that I do. He knows it's just not in his interest to acknowledge and accept it. So 20,000 people voted, 98% Trump, 96% Trump, 92% Trump, and 93% Trump. I wonder who the 7% on the YouTube stream that think that crazy Joe Biden is going to win the presidential debate tomorrow night, when the only victory even possible for him is to keep his trousers up all night. God willing, I'll be back on Sunday with the mothership, with the mother of all talk shows. I hope you'll join me now. More than 3 million people, nearly 3.5 million people, are watching all or part of this show every week. That's quite an achievement. A lot more than will ever watch PiersMorgan. You get me? Good night.